Hi guys, it's Casey, and today we're going to talk about my March TBR. So February is coming to a close and it's time to pick out the books I'm going to read in the month of March. So normally what I would do at the beginning of a TBR video is talk about whether or not I was able to accomplish last month's TBR, but I'm filming this pretty early so it's only about halfway through the month, so I don't exactly know. Right now I'm on pace to, but I gave myself a pretty big TBR this past month and next month is no exception. So let's just be optimistic and say I probably did it. So just like I've done for the past 2 months, I'm going to decide my TBR based on dice rolls. So my Goodreads goal is to read about 75 books this year, which comes out to around 6 books a month. So what I want to do is I want to roll 1 through 100 6 times, and that will correspond to a specific prompt on a list of 100 prompts that I've come up with, and then I find a book for each of those prompts. Roll some dice, which pick a prompt, and then I pick a book. It's pretty straightforward, so let's go ahead and get into the first roll. Roll number 1. 16. So the very first roll I got was 16, which is a book about space. And for that, I'm going to pick a book that I just got and have been wanting to read all month, but I've been holding off to try to actually finish this February TBR. And that is Leviathan Wakes by James S. A. Corey. So Leviathan Wakes is the first book to the Expanse series, which I think is a 8 planned to be 9 book space opera sci-fi series. This is the part where I realize I don't know any more about the plot. So if I'm gonna be completely honest, like many of my other TBRs, I don't know much about this book. All I know is that this is a series that is extremely well loved. Several people have been pushing me to watch the TV show, but I've been really wanting to read more sci-fi lately, so I figured this would be a great place to start. I've heard incredible things about it, and as an aside, my favorite video games of all time are the Mass Effect trilogy. I looked up a list on Goodreads about books that are like the Mass Effect games, and Long Way to a Small Angry Planet was on there, and so was this, which like spiked my hype levels even further than they already were. But I've just been hearing so many great things about this, and I love big epic space opera type adventures, and I'm so hyped to read this. I was so excited when I rolled Book About Space as my first roll, because I was gonna cram this somewhere on this TBR. And then it just was right there, right in front of me. And I believe this is a multi-perspective book that follows multiple different characters across this giant sci-fi epic, and I'm just so hyped to read it. Roll number 2. 74. So the next number I rolled was 74, which corresponds to a political fantasy. And for that, I'm going to be reading Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. There are several huge books on this month's TBR, and we're gonna suffer. So Empire of Gold is the 3rd and final book to the Daevabad trilogy, which is a fantasy book that follows our main character Nari, who works as a con woman in 14th century Cairo. One day while she's in the middle of a con, she accidentally summons a Jinn warrior who tells her that she might be more involved in Jinn politics than she ever thought she would be, and she's whisked off to the city of Daevabad. And this is a trilogy I started back in November for the Goodreads fantasy book thing that I was doing. And I really liked the first book, I gave it 4 stars, and then I read the second book and liked it more and gave it 4, I think 4.5 technically. And I've been wanting to just go ahead and knock out the rest of the series, but this book is like almost 800 pages, so I couldn't just like easily slip it in without a TBR prompt that it actually fit for. But political fantasy, it definitely fits for. This follows a lot of court politics, a lot of different warring factions at play, vying for power, and Nari's just kind of stuck in the middle of all of it, trying to make sense of it while making sure she is staying alive and safe and getting what she wants out of it and protecting the people that she cares about. So I'd like to read this month, and then I could finish out that series and check that off my list. I've really been enjoying it, but I'm excited to see where the conclusion is because we left off at a very interesting place at the end of the second book, and I'm very excited to see how everything wraps up from here. Roll number 3. 17. Next, I rolled number 17, which corresponds to a book about psychology. So for that, I'm picking The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Can you see that at all? So The Tipping Point is a nonfiction book that my roommate got me for Christmas a couple years ago, and I haven't read yet. And let's honestly find out what it's about. I know it's about psychology. I know Malcolm Gladwell writes various books about psychology, but they're written for kind of like the everyday public to read. The tipping point is that magic moment when an idea, trend, or social behavior crosses a threshold, tips, and spreads like wildfire. Just as a single sick person can start an epidemic of the flu, so too can a small but precisely targeted push cause a fashion trend, the popularity of a new product, or a drop in the crime rate. This best-selling book, in which Malcolm Gladwell brilliantly illuminates the tipping point phenomenon, is already changing the way people throughout the world think about selling products and disseminating ideas. So that's what it's about. This book is too white for the ring light to like it. Does it work better over here? Here, we'll just... But I am someone who is very interested in psychology, and I haven't read enough nonfiction yet this year, or any nonfiction yet this year. Last year my goal was actually to read one nonfiction book a month, which was kind of hard for me to keep up with, but I feel like I've been missing it a little bit. So I'm excited to get a nonfiction book on this TBR, especially about something that I am very interested in. I believe my roommate read this and she enjoyed it, and she's read several of Malcolm Gladwell's other books, so I'm excited to see what it's all about. Roll number 4. 100. The next roll I did was 100. I kind of knocked the dice a little bit so it looked like 80 at the end, but like, roll the tapes, it was 100 originally. But 100 is my free space, so there is absolutely no prompt for this one. I can just pick any old book I like. And because I couldn't fit it in anywhere else on this TBR, I'm going to be picking Peace Talks by Jim Butcher. So Peace Talks is the 16th book to the Dresden Files series. And I think I've mentioned the Dresden Files in every TBR and every wrap-up since I started my channel last year. But in case you haven't heard my spiel about it yet, broadly speaking, the Dresden Files follows wizard-for-hire Harry Dresden as he works as a private investigator and a consultant for the Chicago Police Department to investigate all manner of crimes perpetrated by supernatural beings or have a weird, spooky, supernatural element to them. It has a very detective noir, mystery of the week kind of feel in the beginning, but then quickly expands to a much broader and higher stakes series than that, but obviously I can't discuss what that is without spoilers because this is book 16. So if I'm being honest, at this point in the month, I haven't actually read Skin Game yet, which is book 15 that's on my February TBR. So I can't even tell you like what my thoughts are about going into this book because I don't know where we are or will be at the end of book 15. But I wanted to keep up my pace of reading one of these a month, and that means if the TBR and time allows, next month I'll probably read Battleground, and then I will be completely caught up on all of the published Dresden Files and ready for what is being called the Apocalyptic Trilogy when it comes out. I'm afraid. Roll number 5. 51. So the 5th roll was 51, and that is one-word title. And for this, I will be reading Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I know, another thick book. What am I doing to myself? Also, this is the second book in this video that I own but haven't actually hauled yet or put on my shelf, so there will be a haul coming out soon. What is this even about? Why am I the worst at this? It is a standalone currently. I think there is a planned sequel to it, but it was published originally as a standalone, and it is one of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere books, so it takes place in his broader universe. Of the Cosmere so far, I have read Elantris, Mistborn Era 1, and The Way of Kings, and people keep telling me that I should read Warbreaker before I move on to Words of Radiance. And I desperately want to read Words of Radiance, so I went ahead and bought this one so I could get to it, because I'm so pumped about the Stormlight Archive. So it's about two sisters and one of them has to marry the God King. And in this world, if you die a hero, you return as a god, and I know that the magic system has to do with color. That's all I know. I feel like in Brandon Sanderson's books, what I know before I go in is what the magic system is, the broad setup of the universe, and like what one main character is doing. And I never know how any of those pieces connect, but I have those 3 pieces of information going in, so I think we're good to go. This one, like all the other UK international editions, is the white with the color, and the color is like very purple, and I am in love with it. It's beautiful. And last roll. 36. And for the final roll, I rolled 36, which is written in verse. And so for that, I'm going to be reading Shout by Laurie Halse Anderson. So this is a book of poetry, or a memoir written in verse. Laurie Halse Anderson is the author of Speak, which is a pretty famous, hard-hitting YA book. So because it's written in verse, it's relatively short, so I don't want to look up too much about it going in. But again, it is a memoir, so it is about the author's life, and I believe her experiences with sexual assault. So not a light and breezy read by any stretch of the imagination, but I have heard that the poetry in it is phenomenal. One of my friends on Goodreads said it was the best poems that they had found in a book written in verse, and that excites me a lot as someone who's trying to get into poetry, and this sounds like a very beautiful and haunting way to kind of tell that story, so I hesitate to say I'm looking forward to it because of the dark topics of it, but I am very much looking forward to this book. But alright, this is March's TBR. What am I doing? Like, okay. So all three of these are huge. One of them's sci-fi, but essentially huge sci-fi fantasy books. Plus I'm reading Peace Talks, which Peace Talks is actually, I think, shorter than a lot of Dresden books still. So like, not even counting that, but reading all three of these in a month, like, is a choice that I have made. Can she do it? Stay tuned. If you've read any of these, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please also let me know what you're reading this month, because I love seeing TBRs and I love watching TBR videos, and I just like to know what everyone's up to. But other than that, I think that's all I've got for you guys today. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading, I have a link to my Goodreads down in the description below. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.